She flipped my masterpiece for pennies. I made a move she never saw coming, and now she's one step from losing everything unless she meets my ultimatum. The phone call came at 7:43 on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee from the same mug I'd used for 15 years, when Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker with news that would change everything between us forever. "Dad, I need to tell you something, and you're probably going to be upset. But before you say anything, just remember that I'm an adult, and I can make my own decisions." My stomach dropped. Those words, that tone. It's never good news when your daughter starts a conversation like that. I set down my mug carefully, watching the steam curl up toward the ceiling, and braced myself for whatever bombshell was about to destroy my morning. "What happened, sweetheart?" "I sold your Mustang." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't process what she'd said. The Mustang, my 1967 Shelby GT500, the car I'd spent 12 years restoring in my garage, the car that represented every weekend sacrifice, every paycheck stretched thin, every dream I'd poured into chrome and steel. "You what?" "I sold it, Dad, yesterday. I'm sorry, but I needed the money for the down payment on my new apartment. The one downtown with the view of the river. You remember I showed you the listing." My hands went numb. 12 years. 12 years of sanding rust, rebuilding the engine, tracking down original parts at swap meets across 3 states. 12 years of my life reduced to a down payment on some trendy apartment she probably couldn't afford anyway. "Sarah, that car wasn't yours to sell." "Technically, it was in my name, remember? You put it in my name for insurance reasons when I turned 18. You said it would save you money on premiums." The memory came flooding back. She'd been right. I had transferred ownership to her name because my insurance agent said it would cut my costs in half. Sarah was a good driver, no accidents, no tickets. It seemed like a smart financial move at the time. I never imagined she'd use that technicality to destroy something that meant everything to me. "How much did you get for it?" $45,000. The buyer seemed really happy with the price. $45,000. I closed my eyes and felt something cold settle in my chest. That car was worth at least $75,000, maybe more to the right collector. She'd sold my dream for less than it was worth because she needed quick cash and couldn't be bothered to find the right buyer. "Sarah, that car was worth twice what you sold it for." "Well, I needed the money fast, and that's what the first buyer offered. Besides, Dad, it's just a car. You can buy another one." Just a car. Just a car. I looked out my kitchen window at the empty spot in my driveway where the Mustang used to sit. The oil stain on the concrete was still there, a ghost outline of what I'd lost. "That wasn't just a car, Sarah. That was 12 years of my life. That was your grandfather's memory. That was something I built with my own hands. I know you're emotional about it, but you have to understand my position. I'm 25 years old, and I'm finally ready to move out of this cramped apartment and start building a real life for myself. The Mustang was just sitting in your garage collecting dust anyway." Collecting dust. The car I drove every Sunday morning, rain or shine. The car I'd taken her in when she was learning to drive, letting her practice in empty parking lots while she laughed and stalled the engine. The car that had been our bond, our shared project when she was younger and actually cared about spending time with her old man. "So what's done is done then. You're not sorry, you're just warning me after the fact." "I am sorry you're upset, Dad, but I'm not sorry I did it. This apartment is going to change my life. It's in the arts district, walking distance from galleries and theaters. It's where successful people live. Successful people. I'd been successful once, built a construction company from nothing, employed 43 people at its peak, put Sarah through college without her taking on a single dollar of student debt. But apparently, that kind of success didn't count anymore. Not like living in the right zip code with the right view. And you couldn't ask me for help with the down payment? Dad, you would have said no. You always say no when I need money for anything you don't approve of. Remember when I wanted to take that art class in Florence, or when I applied for that internship in New York but needed help with living expenses? You always have some lecture about financial responsibility and living within my means. She was right, and that stung worse than the betrayal. I had said no to those things, not because I didn't want to help her, but because I'd seen too many kids get everything handed to them and never learn to work for anything. I'd been trying to teach her the value of earning her own way, but this felt different. This felt like punishment for all those times I'd made her earn what she wanted instead of just writing checks. "Look, what's done is done," Sarah said, her voice taking on that impatient edge she got when she wanted a conversation to be over. "I have to get to work. We can talk about this later if you want, but the car is gone and I'm not giving the money back." The line went dead. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the black screen, feeling like I'd just been sucker punched by someone I'd trusted completely. I walked out to my garage and stood in the empty space where the Mustang used to be. The workbench still held the special tools I'd collected over the years: chrome wrenches, torque specifications written in my own handwriting, a half-empty bottle of leather conditioner I'd used on the seats just last weekend. On the pegboard above the workbench hung a photo from 3 years ago. Sarah and me at the local car show, both of us grinning beside the Mustang with its first-place trophy. She'd been so proud that day, telling everyone who would listen about how her dad had built the car from scratch, how they had worked on it together. That girl was gone now, replaced by someone who saw everything in terms of what it could do for her immediate wants. My phone buzzed with a text message. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, but instead of an apology, I found something that made my blood run cold. "Dad, I forgot to mention, I also put my BMW up for sale. The payment is too high now that I have the new apartment rent to worry about. Should get around $30,000 for it. Thanks for understanding." I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. Sarah's BMW, the car I'd co-signed for when she graduated college. The car she'd begged me to help her get because all her friends had nice cars and she didn't want to be embarrassed driving something older. The car that was probably worth exactly what she'd get for it, maybe more if she found the right buyer. The car that represented her own taste, her own choices, her own priorities. An idea began forming in my mind. Not revenge exactly, but something that felt like justice. Sarah had taught me an important lesson about technicalities and ownership, about how legal documents mattered more than trust or family bonds. Maybe it was time I taught her a lesson in return. I walked back into my house and opened my laptop, fingers moving across the keyboard with purpose I hadn't felt in months. The first search was simple: BMW car auctions near me. The second search was more specific: how to buy repossessed vehicles at auction. The third search made me smile for the first time since that phone call. What happens when a co-signer buys the car they co-signed for? Sarah wanted to play games with ownership and technicalities? Fine. But she was about to learn that her old man had been playing those games a lot longer than she had. And unlike her, I actually knew the rules. The BMW auction listing appeared on my screen 3 days later, and I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. There it was, Sarah's 2021 BMW 328i, Alpine white with black leather interior, listed for repossession auction the following Tuesday morning. Apparently, my daughter's financial planning skills were even worse than I'd thought. She'd missed 3 payments while saving up for her dream apartment, and the bank had finally lost patience. The irony was beautiful in its simplicity. She'd sold my car to fund her new lifestyle, but couldn't maintain the payments on her own car because of the additional expenses that lifestyle required. I called my bank and arranged for a cashier's check. Not for the full amount, just enough to cover what I estimated the bidding might reach. Sarah's BMW was nice, but it wasn't a classic. It was a depreciating asset that had already lost 30% of its value the moment she'd driven it off the lot 3 years ago. The auction house was exactly what I'd expected. A converted warehouse on the industrial side of town, filled with cars that told stories of financial mistakes and broken dreams. Repo auctions weren't glamorous affairs. They were business transactions, pure and simple. I arrived early and walked the lot, inspecting the vehicles like I used to inspect construction sites. Sarah's BMW sat in the 3rd row, still pristine despite its circumstances. She'd always been meticulous about car care, I'd give her that. The interior smelled like the expensive leather cleaner she bought, and there wasn't a scratch on the exterior. The other bidders were mostly dealers and mechanics, people who understood the value of buying below retail. I recognized a few faces from previous auctions I'd attended over the years, back when I was hunting for parts for the Mustang. The auctioneer was a fast-talking man in his 50s who'd clearly done this 1,000 times before. He moved through the cheaper cars quickly, banging his gavel with the rhythm of a machine gun. When he reached Sarah's BMW, I felt my pulse quicken. Lot 47, 2021 BMW 328i, 63,000 miles. Clean title, starting bid $8,000. A dealer in the front row opened at 8. Another jumped to 10. I waited, watching the bidding climb slowly. 15,000, 18, 22. The bidding slowed at 25,000. I could see the dealers calculating profit margins in their heads, factoring in transport costs and lot fees and the time it would take to flip the car. 26,000 from the back corner. 27 from a woman with a clipboard who looked like she bought cars for a living. 28,000, going once. I raised my hand. 29,000 from the gentleman in the blue shirt. The woman with the clipboard hesitated, then shook her head. The dealer who'd been bidding looked at me with mild curiosity but didn't counter. 29,000 going once, going twice. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the warehouse. Sold to bidder number 107 for $29,000. I walked to the cashier's window, feeling lighter than I had in days. 29,000 for a car that had cost Sarah 38,000 when she'd bought it. The bank would use the money to pay down her loan, but she'd still owe them the difference. Plus late fees, plus repossession costs, plus auction fees. The math was simple and brutal. Sarah now owed roughly $15,000 on a car she no longer owned. A car that was now legally mine, free and clear. I drove the BMW home and parked it in the exact spot where the Mustang used to sit. The oil stain was still there, a permanent reminder of what I'd lost. But now it was covered by something else, something that represented a different kind of value. My phone rang as I was walking back into the house. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, and for the first time in days, I answered with something resembling a smile. Dad, I have some bad news about my car. I know about the repossession, sweetheart. These things happen when people don't make their payments. Wait, how do you know about that already? The bank just called me this morning. Word travels fast in small towns. I kept my voice neutral, conversational. What are you going to do about transportation? I don't know. The bank says I still owe money even though they took the car. Something about the auction price not covering the full loan balance. It's so unfair, Dad. I never missed a payment until recently, and it was only 3 months. 3 months is a long time in banking terms, Sarah. Banks aren't known for their patience with delinquent loans. I was hoping maybe you could help me figure this out. Maybe co-sign for another car, something smaller, more affordable. I learned my lesson about overextending myself. The audacity was breathtaking. 3 days after selling my dream car without asking, she wanted me to help her buy a replacement for the car she'd lost through her own poor financial decisions. Sarah, I think you need to handle this situation on your own. You're an adult, and you can make your own decisions, remember? Dad, please. I know you're still angry about the Mustang, but I really need help here. I can't get to work without a car, and I can't afford the new apartment without my job. The new apartment? The one she'd bought with money from my stolen car. The apartment that had caused her to miss car payments and lose her transportation. Have you considered moving back to your old apartment, the cheaper one? I already signed the lease and paid the deposit. I can't back out now. Of course she couldn't. Sarah had never been one to plan for contingencies or consider the long-term consequences of her decisions. She lived in the moment, assuming that problems would somehow solve themselves or that someone else would step in to fix whatever went wrong. Well, I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're resourceful when you need to be. Dad, are you really going to leave me hanging like this after everything we've been through together? After everything we've been through, like I was the one who'd betrayed family trust. Like I was the one who'd sold something precious without permission. Sarah, you made it very clear that our relationship is transactional now. You take what you need and justify it after the fact. I'm simply following your example. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what I think is fair. I walked to my front window and looked out at Sarah's former BMW sitting in my driveway. The afternoon sun reflected off its pristine paint job, creating patterns of light that reminded me of the way chrome used to gleam on the Mustang's bumpers. I think it's fair that actions have consequences. I think it's fair that people who make poor financial decisions learn from those mistakes instead of having someone else bail them out. And I think it's fair that trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Dad, what do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry I sold your car, but I can't undo it now, and I still need help with my current situation. What I want, Sarah, is for you to understand that your actions affected more than just yourself. That car wasn't just an asset to be liquidated when you needed cash. It was 12 years of my life, and you threw it away without a second thought. I get that you're sentimental about it, but it's gone now. We need to focus on moving forward. Moving forward. Such a convenient phrase for someone who'd never had to deal with the long-term consequences of her choices. You're right about moving forward, Sarah. And part of moving forward is learning to solve your own problems instead of expecting someone else to fix them for you. So you're really not going to help me? I'm helping you more than you realize. I'm helping you learn independence and accountability. Two things that will serve you well in the future. After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in my recliner, looking out at the BMW through my living room window. It wasn't the Mustang. It would never be the Mustang. But it represented something else entirely. It represented justice, not revenge, but the natural consequences of choices made without consideration for others. Sarah would figure out her transportation issues eventually. She'd probably take the bus for a while, or borrow money from friends, or maybe even learn to live within her means for once in her life. And every day that she struggled to get to work, every time she had to explain to her friends why she was taking public transportation, every moment of inconvenience and frustration, she'd remember the lesson I was teaching her. Actions have consequences. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired, and sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who refuse to enable your worst impulses. My phone buzzed with a text message, not from Sarah this time, but from my insurance agent, confirming coverage for my newly acquired BMW. I smiled and raised my glass to the empty spot where the Mustang used to be. Here's to new beginnings, I said aloud, and to old lessons finally being learned. The satisfaction lasted exactly 4 days. That's how long it took for Sarah to discover that her father now owned the car she'd lost to repossession. The discovery came not through any confession on my part, but through the small-town network that makes privacy impossible and secrets temporary. Jennifer Walsh, Sarah's former college roommate, worked at the DMV. During her lunch break, she'd noticed an interesting coincidence in the daily registration transfers. Sarah's BMW, the one everyone knew had been repossessed, had been registered to someone with the last name Hayes, the same last name as Sarah's father. Jennifer, being the kind of friend who couldn't keep interesting information to herself, called Sarah within the hour. "Dad, we need to talk, right now." Sarah's voice cracked through my phone speaker like a whip, all pretense of daughterly affection stripped away. I was in my garage, organizing tools that hadn't been touched since the Mustang disappeared, when her fury found me. "About what, sweetheart?" "Don't you dare sweetheart me. You bought my car at auction. My own father bought my repossessed car and didn't tell me." I set down the wrench I'd been holding and walked to my workbench, where the BMW's keys sat next to my coffee mug. Such small pieces of metal to carry such enormous weight. It was at a public auction, Sarah. Anyone could have bought it. Anyone except the person whose name was on the loan. Anyone except the father who was supposed to support his daughter instead of kicking her when she was down. Support. An interesting choice of words from someone who'd liquidated 12 years of my passion without a moment's hesitation. I supported you for 25 years, Sarah. I supported you through college, helped you get that car in the first place, co-signed the loan when you had no credit history. But apparently, support only flows one direction in this family. This is different, and you know it. This is vindictive and cruel, and not like you at all. Not like me. She was right about that. The man who'd raised her would have swallowed this betrayal, found a way to rationalize her behavior, probably even helped her buy a replacement car while pretending the Mustang had never mattered. That man was gone now, evolved into someone who understood that love without boundaries wasn't love at all. What's cruel, Sarah, is selling someone's most precious possession while they sleep peacefully, trusting you completely. What's vindictive is using legal technicalities to justify theft from your own family. I didn't steal anything. The car was in my name. And your BMW was in both our names. Turns out technicalities work both ways. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow, the way she'd breathed as a child when she was trying not to cry after a skinned knee or a broken toy. "How much did you pay for it?" "$29,000. $29,000. Her voice broke on the numbers. Dad, that car was worth 38 when I bought it. Even used, it's worth at least 35. Market value and auction value are different things, Sarah. Just like the $75,000 Mustang you sold for 45. The parallel hit her like cold water. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, calculating the mathematics of consequences she'd never considered before. So what now? You're going to keep it? Drive around town in your daughter's repossessed car like some kind of trophy? I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it yet. Maybe I'll keep it. Maybe I'll sell it. Maybe I'll donate it to charity. The beauty of ownership is having choices. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. For the first time in months, actually. Dad, please. I know I hurt you with the Mustang situation, but this isn't the way to handle it. This is just going to destroy our relationship permanently. Our relationship. As if we still had one worth preserving. As if the foundation of trust hadn't already been bulldozed by her selfishness and my enabling. Sarah, our relationship was destroyed the moment you decided that your immediate wants mattered more than 25 years of sacrifice and love. I'm just acknowledging reality. That's not true. We can fix this. We can work through it like we always have. Like we always have. Meaning like I'd always fixed everything while she learned nothing from the experience. The pattern was so clear now, so obviously toxic, that I wondered how I'd missed it for so long. The only thing that needs fixing is your understanding of how relationships actually work. They're built on mutual respect, not one-sided exploitation. I never exploited you. $45,000 says otherwise. Plus, 3 years of car payments I helped make possible through my co-signature. Plus, 4 years of college tuition. Plus, the down payment on your first apartment. Plus, countless other expenses I covered without question. Because I thought that's what good fathers did. That's different. That's what parents are supposed to do for their children. Parents are supposed to raise children who become adults capable of making good decisions. Somewhere along the way, I failed at that part. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Sarah had always been my pride, my proof that I'd done something right in a world that seemed determined to punish decent people. But pride built on illusion wasn't really pride at all. So that's it then? You're writing me off as a failed experiment? I'm acknowledging that enabling bad behavior isn't helping anyone. You want to be treated like an adult. Start acting like one. Take responsibility for your choices and their consequences. And what about forgiveness? What about family? What about all those Sunday mornings you spent teaching me about values and character? What about them, Sarah? Did any of those lessons stick? Or were you just waiting for the chance to cash out on everything I'd tried to teach you? The cruelty in my own voice surprised me. This wasn't who I'd been before the Mustang disappeared, before I'd learned that trust could be weaponized by the people closest to you. Dad, you're scaring me. This isn't like you at all. Maybe the person I was before was too naive for his own good. Maybe it took losing something irreplaceable to understand what really matters. And what matters is revenge. What matters is consequences. What matters is learning that actions affect other people. What matters is understanding that trust, once broken, doesn't automatically repair itself just because you want it to. I walked to my front window and looked out at the BMW, sitting in the exact spot where the Mustang used to live. The afternoon sun caught its paint the same way it used to catch the chrome on my dream car, but the beauty felt hollow somehow, necessary, but empty. Sarah, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Okay, you have a choice to make. You can keep seeing yourself as the victim of your own poor decisions, in which case we have nothing more to discuss. Or you can start taking responsibility for the damage you've caused and figure out how to rebuild the trust you destroyed. What does that even mean? It means acknowledging that selling my car was wrong, not just inconvenient for me. It means understanding that your financial problems are yours to solve, not mine to fix. It means proving through actions, not words, that you understand the difference between family and exploitation. And if I do that, if I somehow prove I've learned my lesson, what then? Then maybe we can have a conversation about what happens to your car. Maybe we can talk about what a real relationship between adults looks like. Maybe we can figure out how to move forward without me feeling like an ATM with emotions. The BMW's keys felt heavy in my pocket as I spoke, like small anchors weighing down the possibility of reconciliation. Part of me wanted to throw them at her feet and pretend none of this had happened, but that part of me had enabled 25 years of selfishness disguised as love. How long do I have to prove myself? However long it takes. Trust isn't rebuilt on a schedule, Sarah. It's earned back one honest interaction at a time. After she hung up, I sat in my garage surrounded by tools that no longer had a purpose and memories that no longer brought joy. The empty space where the Mustang used to be felt like a wound that wouldn't heal, a constant reminder of what happened when love became indistinguishable from weakness. But the BMW keys in my pocket felt different. They felt like possibility. Not the possibility of returning to what we'd had before, but the possibility of building something better, something honest, something based on mutual respect instead of one-sided sacrifice. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The preview showed just enough to make my heart skip. Mr. Hayes, this is David Mitchell. I believe I purchased your 1967 Shelby GT500 from your daughter last week. I was wondering if you might be interested in discussing a potential repurchase arrangement. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling something stir in my chest that I'd thought was dead forever. Hope, maybe. Or justice. Or just the simple satisfaction of discovering that some stories don't end where you think they do. The Mustang wasn't gone forever. It was just waiting for me to be strong enough to bring it home on my own terms. I called David Mitchell back that same evening, my hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. The number connected to a warm voice with the kind of measured cadence that suggested someone who chose his words carefully. Mr. Hayes, thank you for calling me back so quickly. I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly. Your daughter gave me your contact information when she mentioned that the car had special significance to you. She told you about me? Not much, but enough. She seemed conflicted about the sale, mentioned that you'd restored the car yourself over many years. When I got it home and really started examining the workmanship, I understood why she might have had second thoughts. The workmanship. I closed my eyes and pictured every detail I'd crafted with my own hands. The engine bay where I'd spent countless hours making sure every bolt and wire was exactly where it belonged. The interior where I'd hand-stitched the leather seats using techniques I'd learned from YouTube videos and old-fashioned trial and error. Mr. Mitchell, can I ask why you're interested in selling it back? Most collectors aren't in the habit of flipping cars they just bought. Please, call me David. And you're right, I don't usually buy and sell quickly, but this situation feels different. The car is magnificent. Don't misunderstand me. The restoration work is museum quality. But I can tell it wasn't built for someone like me. What do you mean? I mean, it was built with love, not just skill. Every modification, every detailed choice, it all tells the story of someone who wasn't just restoring a car, but creating something deeply personal. I've owned dozens of classics over the years, and I can always tell the difference between a professional restoration and a labor of love. The observation caught me off guard. Most people saw the Mustang's value in terms of horsepower and market price. They admired the paint job or complimented the chrome. But they missed the deeper story written in every careful decision I'd made during those 12 years. That's very perceptive of you, David. I should mention, I'm not looking to make a profit here. I paid your daughter $45,000, which I now understand was well below market value. If we can work something out, I'd want you to have it back for what I paid, not what it's actually worth. The generosity stunned me. In a week where I'd learned harsh lessons about human nature and family loyalty, David Mitchell was offering something I'd thought extinct, genuine kindness between strangers. That's incredibly generous, but I have to ask why you'd do something like that. Because 30 years ago, my father sold my first car without asking me. A 1969 Camaro I'd been working on since high school. He needed money for business expenses and figured I'd understand since I was away at college. I never got that car back. And I never quite got over the feeling that something precious had been taken from me. The parallel was too perfect to be coincidental. David understood exactly what Sarah had stolen from me, not just in monetary terms, but in emotional significance. He knew the weight of losing something you'd poured your heart into. I appreciate the offer more than you know, David, but $45,000 is money I don't have right now. I figured that might be the case. Would you be interested in a payment plan? Something manageable that doesn't strain your finances? The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, working through details that seemed too good to be true. David was willing to hold the car for 6 months while I arranged financing. He'd even let me visit it on weekends, work on it in his garage if I wanted to make any additional improvements. By the time we hung up, I had a path back to my dream car that didn't require me to compromise my principles or enable Sarah's irresponsibility. It would take time and sacrifice, but the Mustang could come home on my terms, bought with my money, owned free and clear without any legal complications or family entanglements. The next morning brought another phone call, this one less welcome but somehow expected. "Dad, I heard you talk to the guy who bought your car." "Word travels fast, Sarah. Are you really going to buy it back from him, even after everything that's happened?" The question carried layers of meaning. Was I going to forgive her betrayal? Was I going to pretend the last week hadn't changed everything between us? Was I going to return to being the father who fixed her problems and absorbed her mistakes without consequences? I'm going to buy back my car, yes. What that means for us remains to be seen. I don't understand why you can't just let this go. It's been a week, Dad. How long are you going to stay angry about this? Stay angry. As if my response was emotional rather than logical. As if learning not to be a doormat was just a phase I'd grow out of once my feelings cooled. Sarah, this isn't about anger anymore. This is about understanding who we are to each other going forward. We're father and daughter. That's who we are. That's who we've always been. No, we've been enabler and enabled. I've been your personal bank account and problem solver. And you've been someone who takes what she needs without considering the cost to anyone else. The harshness in my own voice surprised me, but the words felt true in a way that politeness never had. Sometimes honesty required cruelty, especially when kindness had been mistaken for weakness for too long. That's not fair, Dad. I never asked you to solve all my problems. You didn't have to ask. I volunteered for 25 years because I thought that's what good fathers did. But good fathers also teach their children to be responsible adults, and I failed at that part. So what are you saying? That you're done being my father? I'm saying I'm done being your enabler. If you want a father, you'll have to settle for one who expects you to act like an adult. The conversation devolved from there, cycling through accusations and justifications that felt increasingly hollow. Sarah wanted absolution without acknowledgement, forgiveness without change. I wanted accountability and genuine remorse before any discussion of reconciliation. We were speaking different languages now, shaped by different understandings of what family meant and what love looked like in practice. After I hung up, I drove to David Mitchell's house to see the Mustang. He lived in a modest neighborhood similar to mine, with a detached garage that had been converted into a proper workshop. The Mustang sat under a car cover, protected and cared for like the treasure it was. David pulled away the cover with the reverence of someone unveiling a work of art. There she was, exactly as I'd built her. Candy apple red paint that reflected the overhead lights like liquid fire. Chrome bumpers that gleamed with the same intensity they'd had the day I'd installed them. Every detail exactly as I remembered, as if the car had been frozen in time, waiting for my return. "She's beautiful," David said quietly. "I can see why losing her was so devastating." I ran my hand along the fender, feeling the smoothness of paint I'd applied with my own hands. The car felt solid, real, more substantial than the betrayal that had separated us or the anger that had consumed me since. "Thank you for taking care of her. Thank you for building something worth taking care of." We worked out the final details of our arrangement over coffee in David's kitchen. 6 months to arrange financing, weekend visitation rights, a handshake agreement between two men who understood that some things transcended simple business transactions. Driving home in Sarah's BMW felt different now. The car was still a symbol of consequences and justice, but it no longer felt like the end of the story. It was a bridge between what I'd lost and what I was working to regain. A temporary measure that would give way to something better once I'd proven to myself that I could rebuild on my own terms. That evening, I sat in my garage with a legal pad and calculator, working through the mathematics of redemption. $45,000 over 6 months meant $7,500 per month, more than I could manage on my retirement income alone. But I had assets now. The BMW was worth at least $30,000, probably more to the right buyer. The irony was perfect. Sarah's repossessed car would fund the return of my stolen dream. Her poor financial decisions would enable my recovery from her betrayal. The car she'd lost through irresponsibility would purchase back what she'd taken through selfishness. But selling the BMW would also mean giving up the leverage it represented. Without it, I had no tangible reminder of consequences, no physical proof that actions mattered, and trust couldn't be assumed. It would be a gesture of faith that Sarah might interpret as weakness rather than forgiveness. The decision required more thought, more planning. This wasn't just about getting my car back anymore. It was about defining what kind of man I wanted to be going forward and what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted to have with my daughter. My phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. No words, just a photo. Her, standing at a bus stop in the rain, looking miserable and defeated. A not-so-subtle attempt to guilt me into feeling sorry for her transportation problems. I deleted the message without responding. Some lessons required discomfort to stick, and some bridges couldn't be rebuilt until the old foundation was completely cleared away. The rain drummed against my garage windows as I continued calculating, planning, imagining the day when the Mustang would sit in its rightful place again. That day would come, but on my terms this time. Earned through my sacrifice, bought with my money, owned without conditions or complications. And if Sarah wanted to be part of that story, she'd have to prove she deserved a place in it. Not through manipulation or guilt, but through genuine change and earned trust. The math was complex, but the principle was simple. Some things were worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth rebuilding brick by brick until they were stronger than they'd been before. My dream car was one of those things. My self-respect was another. Whether my relationship with my daughter could ever join that list remained to be seen. The weeks that followed brought an unexpected clarity to my situation. Every morning I'd walk out to my garage and see the BMW sitting where the Mustang belonged, and instead of anger, I began to feel something closer to purpose. This wasn't just about cars anymore. It was about teaching lessons that should have been learned decades ago. Sarah's attempts at contact became increasingly desperate as her transportation crisis deepened. Text messages evolved from defiant justifications to barely concealed panic. Photos of herself waiting for buses in the rain gave way to screenshots of rideshare receipts that were bleeding her bank account dry. The woman who'd sold my dream car for quick cash was discovering that her problems couldn't be solved by liquidating other people's treasures. One particularly pathetic message arrived on a Thursday evening while I was researching loan options for the Mustang purchase. Dad, I had to call in sick today because the bus broke down and I couldn't get to work. My boss is threatening to fire me if I miss any more days. Please, I just need help with a cheap car, nothing fancy, just something to get me to work. I stared at that message for a long time, remembering all the times I'd dropped everything to solve her crises. The flat tire I'd changed at midnight because she'd called crying. The overdraft fees I'd covered when her budgeting skills failed. The countless small emergencies that had trained her to see me as a solution rather than a person. This time, I forwarded her message to my financial advisor with a different kind of request. I wanted to explore options for liquidating some investments, not to help Sarah, but to accelerate my timeline for buying back the Mustang. Her desperation was actually clarifying my priorities in ways I hadn't expected. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah's transportation crisis, created by her own poor financial management, was motivating me to make financial moves that would get my car back faster. Her mistakes were becoming the catalyst for my recovery. My phone rang the next morning while I was reviewing loan documents. David Mitchell's name appeared on the screen, and his voice carried an excitement I hadn't heard before. Mr. Hayes, I hope I'm not calling too early, but I wanted to share some news about your Mustang. What kind of news? I took it to a classic car show last weekend, just to show it off a little. I made sure to mention that you were the one who'd done the restoration work. Well, it turns out there's quite a bit of interest in cars with that level of craftsmanship. Interest from buyers, you mean? Not buyers, exactly. Investors. People who understand the difference between a restored car and a rebuilt classic. There's a gentleman named Robert Chen who specializes in automotive investments. He was very impressed with your work. David's explanation continued for several minutes, outlining a proposal that seemed too good to be true. Robert Chen represented a group of classic car enthusiasts who were looking for exceptional restorations to feature in a traveling museum exhibition. They were willing to pay premium prices for cars that told compelling stories about American craftsmanship and dedication. The offer was substantial. $75,000, not for the car itself, but for a 3-year exhibition contract that would tour the Mustang to car shows and museums across the country. I would retain ownership, receive detailed documentation of everywhere the car traveled, and get it back in perfect condition at the end of the contract period. Most importantly, David explained, the $75,000 would be paid up front, meaning I could afford to buy the car back immediately and still have $30,000 left over for whatever I chose to do with it. The proposal felt like vindication in the purest form. Not only would I get my dream car back, but its value would be recognized and celebrated by people who understood what 12 years of passionate work actually meant. Sarah had sold it as scrap metal. These people wanted to display it as art. I scheduled a meeting with Robert Chen for the following Tuesday, spending the weekend researching his company and the exhibition circuit they managed. Everything checked out: professional organization, legitimate contracts, insurance coverage that exceeded what I could have provided myself. This wasn't just a way to get the Mustang back. It was a way to honor what I'd built. Sarah called me Sunday night, her voice hoarse with what sounded like genuine desperation. "Dad, I'm going to lose my job. I've missed 3 days this week because I can't get reliable transportation. My boss says one more absence and I'm fired." I listened without responding, waiting for the inevitable request for help. "I know you're angry about the car, but I'm begging you. I'll pay you back every penny. I'll sign a contract, whatever you want. Just please help me get something to drive." The please carried a weight I'd never heard from her before. Not manipulation or entitlement, but something that sounded almost like humility. Almost. "Sarah, what would happen if you lost your job?" "I'd lose the apartment. I couldn't make rent without my income. I'd have to move back to my old place if I could even get it back. And then what?" "I don't know, Dad. I guess I'd have to start over, find a cheaper place, a different job, figure out how to live on less money." The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us was ready to cross. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah was acknowledging that her choices had consequences she couldn't manipulate or charm her way out of. "You know what's interesting about that scenario, Sarah? It sounds like exactly what happens to people who live beyond their means and make poor financial decisions. It sounds like reality." "Are you saying you want me to lose everything?" "I'm saying that sometimes losing everything is the only way to learn what really matters. You've never faced real consequences for your actions, because someone always stepped in to fix things for you. That someone being you. That someone being me, yes, but that person doesn't exist anymore." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, cycling through familiar territory with a different undertone. Sarah's desperation was real, but so was my resolve. I'd spent too many years enabling her irresponsibility to start backsliding now, especially when I was so close to reclaiming what she'd stolen. After we hung up, I walked to my front window and looked out at the BMW. Tomorrow, I'd meet with Robert Chen and hopefully finalize the exhibition contract. If everything went according to plan, I'd have the Mustang back by the end of the week and enough money left over to make some interesting decisions about Sarah's car. The BMW had served its purpose as a symbol of consequences and justice. But symbols were temporary things, useful until the reality they represented became permanent. Maybe it was time to consider what that reality should look like going forward. My phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. This one was different. No photos, no manipulation, just words that carried a weight I'd been waiting to hear for weeks. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I found out what the Mustang was really worth. David Mitchell's neighbor saw me at the bus stop and told me about the car show, about how much people were praising your restoration work. I had no idea what I'd really taken from you. I thought it was just an old car you were sentimental about. I didn't understand it was actually a masterpiece." I read the message twice, looking for the angle, the manipulation, the way she'd try to use this admission to her advantage. But for once, the words seemed genuine. Not because they would get her what she wanted, but because she'd finally understood what she'd actually done. A second message followed quickly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand why you're so angry. It wasn't just about the money or even about not asking permission. I destroyed something irreplaceable that you'd created with your own hands. I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover it." The apology felt different this time. Not strategic or manipulative, but heavy with genuine remorse. The kind of sorry that came from understanding rather than desperation. But understanding wasn't the same as change, and remorse wasn't the same as transformation. Sarah had learned what the Mustang was worth, but had she learned what trust was worth? Had she learned what family was supposed to mean? Those were questions that couldn't be answered with words. They required time, consistency, and actions that aligned with apologies. They required Sarah to prove that her understanding ran deeper than just realizing she'd underpriced a valuable asset. I typed and deleted several responses, none of them capturing what I wanted to say. Finally, I settled on something simple and honest. Thank you for saying that, Sarah. It means more than you know. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. It was acknowledgement that she'd taken the first step toward understanding what real family relationships required. Whether she'd take the next steps remained to be seen. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. I dressed in my best suit and drove to David Mitchell's house, where Robert Chen was waiting to examine the Mustang and finalize our exhibition contract. Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with a kind of quiet intensity that suggested someone who took his work seriously. He spent over an hour examining every detail of the restoration, asking technical questions that proved he understood the difference between professional work and passionate craftsmanship. This is exceptional work, Mr. Hayes. The attention to detail, the quality of the materials, the way you've maintained period authenticity while improving performance. This isn't just restoration, it's artistry. The compliment felt better than any amount of money Sarah could have gotten for the car. This man understood what I'd built, appreciated the decisions I'd made, recognized the skill and dedication that had gone into every bolt and wire. We finalized the contract over coffee in David's kitchen, the same table where we'd negotiated the car's return just weeks earlier. $75,000 for 3 years of exhibition, with the Mustang traveling to shows and museums where people would see what passion and patience could create. The check was in my hands by noon. More money than I'd seen at one time since selling my construction business years earlier. Enough to buy back my dream car and still have options for the future that I hadn't possessed since Sarah's betrayal. David handled the ownership transfer with the same professionalism he'd shown throughout our dealings. By 2 o'clock, the Mustang was legally mine again, free and clear, with exhibition paperwork that would take it places I'd never imagined when I was working alone in my garage. Driving home felt different this time, not just because I'd reclaimed something precious, but because I'd proven something to myself. I could recover from betrayal without compromising my principles. I could rebuild what had been destroyed without enabling the person who'd destroyed it. The BMW was waiting in my driveway when I arrived, sitting in the spot that would soon belong to the Mustang again. But looking at Sarah's repossessed car, I felt something unexpected. Not anger or satisfaction, but something closer to opportunity. The exhibition money had changed my financial position completely. I no longer needed to sell the BMW to afford anything. I could keep it as a reminder of consequences, or I could do something more constructive with it. Something that might teach Sarah a different kind of lesson than the one I'd been focused on. My phone rang as I was contemplating possibilities. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time in weeks, I answered without hesitation. Dad, I just wanted to call and thank you for your text yesterday. I know I don't deserve any kindness from you right now, but it meant everything that you acknowledged my apology. You're welcome, Sarah, and you're right that words aren't enough to repair what's been broken. But they're a necessary starting point. I understand that now. I also understand that I need to figure out my own problems instead of expecting you to fix them. I'm looking into getting a second job, something I can walk to or take the bus to. It won't be easy, but maybe easy isn't what I need right now. The admission surprised me. Sarah had never voluntarily chosen the difficult path when easier options existed. The fact that she was even considering additional work instead of asking for help suggested that maybe the consequences were finally sinking in. That sounds like a mature approach to a difficult situation. Dad, can I ask you something? And please be honest, even if the answer hurts. Go ahead. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? Not today or tomorrow, but eventually? Or have I damaged things beyond repair? The question carried a vulnerability I hadn't heard from her since she was a child. Not manipulation or strategy, but genuine fear that she'd destroyed something irreplaceable. Sarah, forgiveness isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a process that happens over time, based on actions and consistency and rebuilt trust. I can't tell you whether we'll get there, because I don't know what you're going to do with the understanding you say you've gained. But you're not closing the door completely? I'm not closing any doors, but I'm also not opening them just because you've realized what you lost. Trust is earned back slowly, one honest interaction at a time. I understand. And Dad? I want you to know that even if you never forgive me, I'm grateful for everything you did for me growing up. I took it all for granted, but I see it clearly now. You were an amazing father, and I was a selfish daughter. The words hit harder than any of her previous apologies because they weren't asking for anything in return. They were simply acknowledging a truth that had taken her 25 years to recognize. After we hung up, I sat in my living room looking out at the BMW and thinking about possibilities I hadn't considered before. The car represented justice and consequences, but it could represent something else entirely if I chose to let it. Tomorrow, the Mustang would come home. But tonight, I had decisions to make about what kind of man I wanted to be going forward and what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted to rebuild with my daughter. The answers wouldn't come easily, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had the luxury of time to consider them carefully. The exhibition contract had given me financial freedom. Sarah's apparent change in attitude had given me emotional space. The combination created possibilities that hadn't existed just days earlier. My phone buzzed with a text message from David Mitchell. Just wanted you to know the transport truck will pick up the Mustang at 9 tomorrow morning for its first exhibition in Portland. They'll treat it like the treasure it is. I smiled and typed back a response. Thank you for everything, David. You've given me back more than just a car. The evening stretched ahead of me, quiet and full of potential. Tomorrow would bring the Mustang home, but tonight was mine to plan what came next. And for the first time in weeks, the future felt like something worth planning for.